When I was trying to decide how to proceed about this presentation, one of the options was there's an excerpt in my father's book, Anticipatory Systems, which was really the beginning of that paradigm, the whole realization that this is behavior that you see in biological systems across the board, and it has never really been remarked on, much less studied or formalized. Partly because, according to scientific foundations, you can't say that something that hasn't happened yet is actually affecting the behavior of a system in the present. And yet, biological systems are always factoring in the future patterns of their evolutionary environment into their present behavior. And they do it from the foundational level. One correction I think I would make to something that Mihai said, he is talking about this secondary anticipatory system we have evolved with. I don't know if human beings are the only ones with one. I don't really think so. I certainly think we are making the biggest mark on the planet, but clearly conscious awareness or mind is an anticipatory system, but a living organism, just by virtue of the way it's organized, is an anticipatory system. And so in that sense, yes, you are born an anticipatory system and with the capability of a mind, but it's something that you develop better and better as you get older. But as I was saying, when I was trying to decide whether to translate my father's ideas into my own words or not, I found an excerpt of a paper he wrote for Hutchins and his Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions that is as if it was written for this conference. And I think I'll read a couple paragraphs from it for you. It was from a paper called, and I need my glasses. A paper called Planning, Management, Policies, and Strategies for Fuzzy Concepts. And he said in this paper, it is fair to say that the mood of those concerned with the problems of contemporary society is apocalyptic. It is widely felt that our social structure is in the midst of crises, certainly serious and perhaps ultimate. It is further widely felt that the social crises we perceive have arisen primarily because of the anarchic laissez-faire attitude taken in the past towards science, technology, economics, and politics. The viewpoint of most of those who have written on these subjects revolves around the theme that if we allow these anarchies to continue, we are lost. Indeed, one way to make a name nowadays is to prove, preferably with computer models, that an extrapolation of present practices will lead to imminent cataclysm. The alternative to anarchy is management, and management implies in turn a systematic implementation of specific plans, programs, policies, and strategies. Thus it is no wonder that the circle of ideas centering around the concept of planning plays a dominant role in current thought. However, it seems that the net effect of the current emphasis on planning has been simply to shift the anarchy we perceive in our social processes into our ideas about the management of these processes. So if we consider, for example, the area of economic development of the underdeveloped countries, a topic which has been extensively considered by many august bodies, we find A, that there is no clear idea of what constitutes development, B, that the various definitions employed by those concerned with development are incompatible and contradictory, C, that even among those who happen to share the same views as to the ends of development, there are similarly incompatible and contradictory views as to the means by which the end can be obtained. Yet, in the name of developmental planning, an enormous amount of time, ink, money, and even blood is in the process of being spilled. Surely no remedy can be expected if the cure and the disease are indistinguishable. And he says, if it is the case that planning is as anarchic as the social developments it is intended to control, then we must ask whether there is, in some sense, a plan for planning, or whether we face an infinite and futile anarchic regress. It may seem at first sight that by putting a question in this form we gain nothing. However, what we shall attempt to argue in the present paper is that, in fact, this kind of question is well posed in a scientific sense, that it can be investigated in a rigorous fashion and its consequences explored. And he goes on to describe perhaps a plan for planning. But in this particular conference, one of the things that really needs to be examined is the notion of optimality. What should we do? What ought we to do? How do we decide the best course of action? And one of those things is that in physics, the concept never really arises except as a desired human goal in building something. So it comes from a human need to build a tool. You say, okay, this is the functional aspect. It's coming from, this subjective creature. These don't exist in the machine except if we put them in the machine because we build it. In biological systems, however, a value for optimality is actually organized in. Everything about the physiology of a living organism has a set of parameters for this value of optimality, be it body temperature, blood chemistry, salt concentration, etc. And the capabilities of metabolism and repair, which my father called the hallmarks of a living system, they are constantly at work to try and maintain us within these parameters for optimality. And that has to be true because we are open systems which are always interacting with a constantly changing environment, and yet we persist as a life form. So this internally mandated value for optimality that all organisms have is something that you have to consider for evolutionary study. It has to be considered in anything that deals with the physiology of living systems, be it social systems, be it economic and political systems. I mean, this is going to color everything about a living society. So if we can't plan without a value for optimality, so say we want to have a goal and we want it to be a good outcome, yet all of these living organisms on this planet have their own internally mandated value, I was asking myself, how would you then base sort of a general value for optimality in the idea of what should we do now to be good ancestors? And it seemed to me that it was a preservation of options. One of the things that global warming is going to do is remove a whole lot of options. It's going to change the choices that are available to our children, our grandchildren. Environmental pollution, again, is going to make the options narrow. So if there's some way to preserve options for our ancestors, that would be, I guess, the way to go. And in order to do that, you start to see, okay, diversity of species is critical, because as diversity is lessened, the potential options are also lessened. So as I was thinking about, okay, if we were to agree, say, we want to maintain these options, choices, let's start building a plan. And the plan has to have predictions that are going to tell us, okay, if we do this, that's going to happen. If we do this, that's going to happen. And if you want to be scientific about your predictions and use the tools of science to help in generating those predictions, you have to be able to trust that what science is telling you is actually representative of the systems that it's supplying itself to. And as Mihai was pointing out, Descartes kind of said all systems are like a machine, including the human body, including an ecosystem. And so this whole scientific foundation has at its very basis the notion that you can do with any natural system that which you can do with a machine. And a machine being something that we have built, something built by human beings, this starts to bring all kinds of anomalous information in, which is not really part of this particular discussion, and I don't know when I started, so you're going to have to tell me, Tom.
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay. But that also is the finger of God thing. A clock argues a clockmaker. Well, if every living thing is like a clock, yes, it does argue a clockmaker. But what if a clock was a self-entailing, self-organizing system? You can still say there's a clockmaker at a much earlier stage, but it takes the whole intelligent design thing out of scientific debate. So I'll just leave that where that is for now and go on with planning. If we are going to build a model that is going to tell us with some degree of accuracy that we can trust what the outcomes will be of certain choices that we want to take, and then decide which preserves options to the best degree, we need to know we can trust those predictions, or else all of our good intentions will mean nothing. You know, good intentions are well and good, but a lot of blood has been spilled and a lot of species wiped out, generating from actions that had good intentions at their foundation. So the thing that my father was able to do, and the reason that I came to talk about it, is that he, coming at this from biology as opposed to physics, like Newton and Einstein and Descartes and so on, he could see there was something wrong with the tools. There were unanswered questions. There was information coming from two different modes, quantum and relativity, that could not be had from the alternate mode, which said to him, there's more information here than either of these descriptions of reality are covering. What is it? And what he came up with is the things between the parts, the material subsystems of a system interact, and they interact in specific ways. The way they interact determines the effect. So it's the relations. It's the distance between something when it happens. It's the time rate of some process that determines the effect. And you can get two different processes generating the exact same effect. You can get the same process generating two completely different effects. And this has to be taken into account when you're studying causality. Or you're only using a tiny little view and extrapolating a huge pattern from it, and it's incorrect. I would say we can't trust that, particularly when we're dealing with the biosphere. So he set about rebuilding. He went back because the tools weren't working for what he wanted, which was to know why living things are alive, what it is. What is life? That was his main focus. And when he found out he couldn't use physics as it was, he sort of went back in through the history of science and found what he felt were the wrong, at least some of the wrong turns, and started reweaving from first principles and wrote it down as he went through and left basically an expansion of the Newtonian paradigm, one that takes relations into account, one that tells us how you can approach relations, because obviously you can't do it reductionistically. You can't use the techniques that were built saying all systems are like machines. You can't use those for everything you want to know. You can use it for some, but you can't use them for all. And also the notion that time is all in one direction, and it's linear, and it has a past, And where we are is the present, and the future is something that can't be known or affected except blindly. What if it's not like that? And in life we see that time is more cyclical. There are rhythms. There are circadian rhythms. There are all kinds of rhythms in the solar system, patterns that keep repeating and repeating. And he believed, he saw evidence that these are encoded into our living bodies, that they do determine how we do things and what we do and why. So all of this goes into the fact that he felt there's much more information in our bodies besides genetic encodings. And some of this information seems to be at work generating predictions about the patterns that we evolved within, using that information to predict the behavior of our environment as if we're still in our evolutionary environment in the near future. And he said there's really not a way to plan how to deal with systems like this unless you take this quality, this capability into account. So ultimately, I guess my main assertion is that we need to broaden the paradigm before we go building this model and generating our plans about what is the best thing to do. Using our good intentions that's a start. That's better than bad intentions or no intentions, but they've got to be put in the right direction or it will be a total crapshoot.
Or worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's nice.